Hi, I'm Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon.
And you are listening to the Optimized AF podcast.
We know life is hard. We're here to make it simple.
Hey everybody, it's Blake and Stacie. We're back with an Optimized AF podcast. We're super excited today. One, because we're back in studio after dropping the first 6 episodes. I want to take a quick moment and say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for everybody who showed us some love, got out there and listened, subscribed, rated us on the iTunes and the written
Except
reviews.
For the 1 star, you can suck it.
Well, no. Hey, no. Well, I mean, okay. We're not going to hold back. But no, literally, if you care to, we'd love to talk to you because I am a big believer in if we did not provide value.
Or if you have fat fingers, just
it might have been a mistake.
Pony up.
We can get with iTunes and say, no, it wasn't a 1. They actually, no. But seriously, if you're out there, you'd love to have a conversation with us. Genuinely from our hearts, if we know how we can provide value to you, please let us know. For the written reviews, again, love you guys for that. Thank you so much. And we're super excited today because we are entering into a new phase of this podcast by having and welcoming on our first guest interview of this season.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have guests to fold into this conversation. In prepping for this, we did a little pre-show with LinkedIn Live, and it was it's just good to connect with other people and get some other perspectives and opinions. If you feel like you're great at optimizing some aspect of business or life, please reach out to us and let us know. We're looking to really foster and grow this community in Arizona as well, support our local community here, and bring you guys in studio if possible and talk about what you're doing to optimize your life. And today we have Brian Mohr. I can't even tell you how long exactly I've known Brian. Feels like a long time. But I think I met Brian very first when you were at jobbing.com, and I was probably at Caremark as one of the employers. And from there, just have remained friends and am involved with some of the movement that we're going to talk about today, which is conscious capitalism. Some of the many ways that Brian has served our community by bringing in really exceptional minds to the, to speak to the Phoenix market. I think about Raj coming in and talking about what he's passionate about. And I think the connection with Mark and bringing, for example, Mickey Agarwal in to one of the SHRM conferences one time. And for those of you who are on the HR side of the fence, Brian emceed a lot of the conferences. So he's known a little bit for that, but also just speaking on his own, did a TED Talk that was awesome, by the way. If people haven't consumed that, we'll put that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We'll put that
Brian,
out on our YouTube.
What was the topic of that?
The topic was on the importance of real human connection in this ever-increasing digital world that we're living in. And this
That's not relevant at all.
No, right? I mean, and listen, it's not a bag on technology. Technology's great. And if we're not careful and it starts to become a surrogate for real human connection, then I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that we balance it?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll link to that. If you're watching this episode on our YouTube channel, check below. We'll link to that TED Talk.
Yeah, and so today we want to jump in a little bit about a lot of what we talk about so far has been on the personal side of how to optimize your life day to day. And Blake's about to sample his energy drink for the first time. You have to tell us if that's optimized your energy level. But we always like to start with a game, but we keep modifying the game, so I'm not even sure if it's ever going to be consistent. I think we decided to make this potentially a drinking game / a game of describing.
Well, when you say we, I feel like that's a lot of direction at me. But yes, no, I think that there's eventually going to be an evolution in this where it's probably going to be turned into a drinking game, or the option is we're going to put a little bit of a play on a swear jar in the middle of the table. And
or if you're one of my fitness people, do 10 squats every time you hear this word. So that'll work. That works too if you don't want to drink.
Well, I thought we were going to have drinks today. I don't see anything on the table, so I'm a little disappointed.
Next time you're back, Brian, there will definitely be drinks here. Bourbon will be on the table. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do is talk about a word that, and one word comes to mind from something I shared with Blake earlier this week, and that is that consultants use a lot of big flashy words that sometimes are meaningless or up to interpretation, I guess I would say. And they use those words, we've described this before, to really try to sound really smart and help clients feel a little bit more stupid. And so they can get more business and leave them wanting more. And that's really not how we operate, how Blake and I operate. I know it's not how Brian operates, or Tom, who's on next, who is a consultant, operates, but
I
it's
don't
pretty
know any
typical.
big words, actually.
You don't know any big
No,
words?
I try and limit everything to 3 syllables if I can. So this is going to be really hard.
Well, and then if you hear the word, I guess, throughout, and we get to drop the word somewhere in our conversation, that's when you're going to take a drink, take a squat, or whatever you want to do.
Okay.
10 push-ups.
Okay.
It's like punishment.
Okay.
So what's the word today, Blake?
Oh, I thought you were going to have one. You said you had
Well,
one.
we can use the word crystallize.
I think we should use that.
Okay.
I think we should use that.
So I shared
Well, that is
something.
3 syllables.
Yeah. So it's in your bandwidth.
Yeah.
You can do it.
That's in the wheelhouse.
So what does that word mean to you?
What does crystallize mean to me?
We didn't drop this on Brian at the last minute at all. That's intentional, by the way. We make everybody uncomfortable first.
I feel like we need to do this like a spelling bee. It's like, well, can I have the meaning, please?
Yeah, right. Can you use it in a sentence?
Can you use it in a sentence?
Well, I think I could spell it.
It's the Latin origin.
For me, I think what it means is to bring into focus or to bring a sense of clarity. And if I think about the word focus, that's 2 syllables. So that's a much more simple word than crystallize. So I would say, to bring into focus, to bring thoughts and ideas that might have, some level of connection or intersection, and to bring those together into perhaps a more fully formed or focused thought.
Thank you for crystallizing.
Yeah, I feel more focused.
I'd like to actually check the Webster-based definition of crystallize and just see if I'm anywhere near the bullseye.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up.
Well, so that brings up a good point, though, because a lot of these words that the consultants use, right? If you look up the definition of it, they're using it completely out of context, in a lot of times of how it was intended to be defined. But thank you for partaking in our $10 word segment.
Yeah.
And then I think right now, though, let's kind of start talking about this idea of conscious capitalism. We were pre-shown about this, and I've got some exposure to it. Stacie has a lot more, and the benefit of today's episode, if you're listening to this, the business owner is listening and saying, how do I create more value outside the walls of my business, not just for my customer? And I think that's pretty common, that we have this thought process as business owners that I've got a business, I've got employees, and I've got customers. Maybe I'm thinking about my vendors, maybe. But then outside of that, you were sharing with me earlier, there's so many more touch points. There's so many more people that you're connecting with.
And
let's talk about that.
The order. I mean, I think this is something, who's first? Employees, our customers first, right? That conversation comes up a lot. And what's the quality look like in that equation? To really everyone is important in that equation. And is anybody first, second, or third? So you want to give us a little bit of your perspective, no pressure, on an entire movement. So, but you've been involved with this for a long time. So you're the best expert we have to talk about it.
Well, you need to raise the bar. I'll start there. In terms of the order, I have a personal philosophy. So this is not something that is prescribed by conscious capitalism, but thinking about all the different stakeholders in the ecosystem that a business plays in, I just believe that the employees are the most important. We've got to take care of the people who are actually the ones building the business, delivering the service, delivering the products, creating all of the brand marketing. They're the touch points they're the representation, the manifestation of who and what the business is. So I think in my opinion, they are the most important. Now, it's not to say that everyone else doesn't matter, but I think taking great care of the employees, the people, then sets the tone for how they can take care of all of the other aspects of the business. Because we talk about business oftentimes as it's a living, breathing thing. It's not. It's the people that are the living, breathing thing that makes the business successful or not. So how they think and how they feel matters tremendously. I think we've paid so much attention to the thinking side, and not that it's wrong. I mean, we need people that are smart and can do their job and are really good at what they do, but to discount how we feel about the work that we're doing and the level of impact that that has in the discretionary reservoir of effort that we can all bring. I mean, to me, that's the untapped resource.
And the connection between those people. I was sharing a story with Blake on the way over here about purpose. And I had this interesting conversation with Matt Likens, now it's probably 6 or 7 years ago, about defining a purpose for the organization, read Firms of Endearment, and said, and the first thing at least 6 or 7 years ago by CEOs was like, why do I care about this?
Right.
And that book is really about, why do you care about this? Because one, you should really care about the connection between purpose and a greater being. But at the end of the day, it does deliver greater results for the business to be aligned to purpose and have other people aligned to that purpose. And I shared with Blake our story at Althera. We were making people pretty, right? Not a really lofty goal as an organization, not a high amount of purpose behind that. But as we started to do the work around looking at purpose and what is the greater purpose, we were really helping people feel better about themselves. And we ended up with lifting lives, lifting the lives of the people that we were working with, which were the physicians and the practices that were really struggling with managed care. This was a cash pay procedure that they could perform. So it was elevating the lives of the physicians as stakeholders and their businesses, and then the stakeholders of the customers, the self-esteem and feeling good about yourself and showing up in a different way. There were stories of people going on job interviews, feeling much better about themselves after just, again, feeling good from the inside out. And then, of course, cultivating the purpose inside of the organization of lifting lives by doing outreach into the community and the other things that we did as a business. Can you talk a little bit from your perspective about how you've seen purpose translated? That's just one way that translates in a business that was very personal for me. But how have you seen the other ways that purpose has translated inside of that movement to really connect all of the stakeholders that we just talked about?
So I think once an organization has defined why it exists beyond the profit maximization theory that I think has been the driving force of business, I think what it does is it gives all of the stakeholders an opportunity to create some level of human connection or emotional connection or feeling connection with the business. And regardless, if you're an employee, if you're a vendor, if you're a financier, if you're a supplier, a customer, whatever it is, I think what it does is it taps into the emotional component, and we want to go through life feeling good. We want to go through life feeling that the things we do, the things we buy, the place we go to work, the people that we work with, that we feel good about all of those different decisions. And so I think purpose, just as a topic, has this really powerful opportunity to create connection, period, as long as it's authentic.
Yeah. Well, so let's, I think, what I keep hearing, right? If we look back at what we've just said in the last even 3 minutes, it's care, connection, feeling. Why are we so afraid to talk about these things in business?
I mean, we're coming from a world where all of those things were just never talked about, and I wonder: is it fear, or is it just the absence that was even on the playing field, if you will? We're old habits are hard to break, and if you look at virtually every school that teaches business, their teaching is rooted in the X's and O's. It's in the strategy, it's in execution, it's in operations, and those things matter. And we've never allowed the quote unquote soft skills to play in the game. And at the end of the day, we are now at a place where I think it's the soft skills that are A, the hardest to develop, but B, are what will elevate and has shown to elevate business to be phenomenal. I mean, look at Southwest Airlines, just as perhaps the most accessible example. They do what everybody else does. They fly planes. Yet the experience we all have as stakeholders when we fly it is a measurably different experience. And that started with the way the organization was led, so that the employees, knowing how much they were cared for by the people, by Herb and the team and everybody, were able to carry that through. And it's the airline that, up until this year, has had quarter after quarter after quarter of profitability in an industry where nobody else can.
Yeah, you can't argue with that performance. And then you have to look at it and go, well, what's the secret sauce? And then you start to look at, well, what
It's
are they
love.
doing different? It's love.
It's love.
It's literally love.
It's caring.
Like
It's
their-
caring.
their
It's
stock
caring
ticker.
about it's being cared for and then carrying that forward. The
Yeah.
employees being cared for.
Yes.
And then them carrying it forward.
And there's something you said earlier too that's so key to this for me is the authenticity of it. Because I think you're right. I think we're at a pivotal shift where it's starting to become more prevalent that we're seeing companies focus on these soft skills and give the right recognition to the value of those. But then I think we're still inadequately preparing leaders to genuinely and authentically give those into the staff, into their teams, into their employees, into their customers. And so I know I have experienced this. Maybe both of you have, maybe our listeners have, the difference of someone who is going through the motions and trying to care or trying to do something they feel like portrays as them caring, and someone who genuinely and authentically truly does give a shit about you and wants you to succeed. They want nothing more to be the best damn coach in the world and watch their players win.
Right.
There's a completely different feeling in that.
Totally.
Yeah, we talked about Southwest on the way over here, and it was really created as an as to make air travel accessible. That was the original intent. So if you look back at, there's a book called "It's Not What You Sell, It's What You Stand For" by Roy Spence, and he's the one who did the work with Herb on creating the original purpose of Southwest Airlines. And on a personal level, my stepdad flew as a captain for Southwest Airlines, met Herb a few times, and genuinely, to your point, Blake, was a man who showed up exactly as you would hope he would show up to the people that were doing the day-to-day work. And that wasn't because my stepdad was a pilot. It was because it didn't matter what role you were in inside of that organization. He was very real. And I know we all have met Ann Rhodes and know how close she was with him and her story of even building JetBlue in a different way as well. So I think there's a lot of elements right now of questions for me that happen around. I think we're all Gen X in this room. What is our responsibility as Gen X? Because to your point, is it fear? I'll say that when I started in my career, and this was, I think we're about the same age, Brian and I are about the same age, but, we had just gotten out of college and the .com boom was happening. I was working in Silicon Valley, and then the bust happened pretty quickly thereafter, after we graduated. And it was then it was a save your ass sort of situation, right? We were pretty junior. We were starting our families, to some degree getting married, starting to travel down that road, starting to need to be responsible adults. And it was sort of
Such a terrible time.
Oh, it's overrated. Like
responsibility and adulthood.
Adulting sucks.
Sucks.
Yeah.
And we moved into a space where our leaders were boomers. And I mean, I think they did, they were doing a lot of the heavy lifting of leadership during that recession and everything that happened. And I know for myself, it was kind of sit down, shut up, do the work. I don't really care what it takes to get there, how many hours it takes to get there. You're just going to grind it out. And that's how I feel like I was forged into the working world, is in that way. And then, it was funny to me when the first millennials were coming in and everybody was just all up in upheaval about millennials coming in and saying, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's just not an option. And I think Gen Xers were a little bitter. Like, well, we just did this shit for 12 years, 15 years. Who the hell are you guys coming in saying that's not how it's going to be? But I do think it's incumbent to some degree on whether it's politics or whether it's business or whatever space it's in. I think Gen Xers need to have their day to step into the space as leaders and as people that are now have the experience of working and have all of that insight to step up to the plate, especially given now everything that's happening in the world, to say, how do we show up differently? The conscious capitalism is one vehicle to do that. But I think to your point, Blake, it's bringing the love and bringing, something I talk about a lot is trust, bringing all of these less tangible, if you will, elements of how people show up at work. I think it's really incumbent on us to push that envelope a little bit. I don't know what you guys think about that.
No, I think you're right. I think we do need to take some ownership of it. There's a certain level of exposure that this topic has now, you think about vulnerability. Nobody talked about vulnerability until what, 3, 4, when was the
Brene Brown.
Thank you. When was that? When did she do the first TED Talk on vulnerability?
I feel like that was a good 7, 8
Is that
years
7, 8
ago.
years?
Maybe
right?
even longer.
And
believe it or
Simon
not.
Sinek, start with why. That all started happening.
These things they're not new, right? We'll just round up and we're approaching a decade of this stuff being out there. And so I think you're right, though, that we can't rely on the quote unquote heavy hitters that have more notoriety and influence. We have to take that out and apply it now. And we do have to take ownership of it. I think you're absolutely right. But there's a certain level of confidence that has to come to carry that, right? Because you have to be the one to embody it and then get others around you to understand the value of operating a different way. And that takes a little confidence, little bravado, little vulnerability on yourself, because you could find yourself as part of an organization or a team that's not ready. And all of a sudden you are just like, nope, we don't want you in here. You can't be part of this team anymore. That's a fear of a lot of people.
You're not talking about a specific example for yourself and myself. No,
everything's a specific.
We'll just glide right over that. So, Brian, I know talking about potentially, you're involved with creating really a new movement with what you're doing now with LifeTracks, but also how does that translate for you in watching organizations go through this evolution in as being part of the conscious capitalism movement? I think you've had probably more experience than we have in watching people shift gears. I mean, I watched Matt Likens shift gears and kind of have the aha moment of this does matter. This is something that is really aligned to who he was as a human being and made sense for him. And that ended up being the best organization I was ever with so far. But how have you watched leaders step into that space? Because I agree, that's not necessarily an easy ask.
It's interesting. And my gut reaction to it is that I think it actually, this is going to sound maybe crazy, is I think that the leaders who embrace this are at first doing so from a selfish standpoint, that they want to feel better about what they're doing. And unless and until they come to grips with satisfying their own sense of what feels good for them, this is a really hard thing to do. If you're doing this just because you believe in all of the data now that supports that this drives a better business result, I think there will always remain that level of inauthenticity that the people that you are leading, that you have the privilege and honor to lead, they'll see it, they'll feel it. And so I think part of it has to start from a place of selfishness, which frankly, I don't think is all that bad, because if you can find, and a great example, a great local example is Adam Goodman at Goodman's Interior Structures. And as he would tell the story far better than I would, when he was given the opportunity to take over as CEO of the third generation business and not pursue, or at least not as actively pursue, his passion and skill and talent in journalism, he needed to come to a reckoning of, all right, if I'm going to lead a commercial office furniture company, what needs to be present for me to lead this in a way that feels good for me? And thankfully, he had that drive and that sense of curiosity in him to learn and figure out what's that thing going to be. And if he didn't have that selfishness, and maybe he wouldn't call it that, and it's not a judgment, it's just an inner curiosity, I don't know that they would have landed where they're at and frankly have been on such a great path and driving a really successful business right now.
So maybe we can hold there for a second. I think if you're a leader listening to this and you're wondering, gosh, this really hits home, maybe I'm not showing the amount of care that that I'm capable of and that I have the desire to do, where do they start?
Well, I think part of it has to they have to answer their own question of, what do they feel like they're being called to do? And it's inner work. It's the really hard stuff that you got to do. Yeah. And not everybody wants to do it. And that's okay. If you're not going to do it, you're not going to do it. But you got to want it yourself. You can't be coerced into it. I don't even think you can be coached into it. It's got to come from inside. And, it happens at different places, different times, different speeds for everybody. And it is truly as overhyped or overused as the cliche is. It's a journey. And if you don't want to be on it, then there's nothing, nobody can push you to it. You have to want it for yourself. And so as a leader, I think, to answer your question, I think if you don't, as an individual, have that own sense of curiosity of, I wonder what it is that would take me to the next level. What will help me, not only inspire myself, but inspire the people that I have the honor and privilege to lead. And if that answer is read more strategy books, figure out better ways to execute, get better patents, find a better CTO, okay. Those are all options, but I think you'll still, this is my opinion, you'll still be left longing for something that is so much bigger than all of those things, and that's the inner work, which frankly, is a never-ending process.
Yeah, otherwise I feel like you end up being empty, if you continue to pursue things external to yourself.
I do as well, but not everybody believes that.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And I'm not condemning those that don't. I'm who the hell am I to pass judgment on anybody at this point? And that's the one thing I think, having a few more laps around the track and approaching 50, that's just like, I'm going to do my best to continue to march to the beat of my drum. And I know there's other people that are drumming the same rhythm. And I want to be with those people.
God, that's so relevant right now and so many topics that we're not going to touch on. But the world needs more of that, where you're not so consumed with everybody else doing, saying, looking, feeling, whatever you personally feel is, in this topic, success, right? If you reach 80 and you look back on your life and you say, damn, I was really successful. Look at all those profits I had. Look at all those quarter after quarter after quarter where I knocked it out of the park. Great. You know what? You do you.
Yeah.
Now, I've made the choice, and I know everybody at this table, I think we're all very similar in this. I'd rather look back and let's say, how many lives did I impact? How many personal connections did I make to improve or positively have an impact on somebody else? And that's what's going to make my life have meaning. I'm going to start first and foremost with my children. I'm going to start first and foremost with my immediate family, of course. But then I don't go out, I do go, I should say, outside of that. And I want to take that into my workplace. I want people to look back, and if they've ever had an opportunity to work with me, I want them to go to other organizations and have an example that hopefully they can take in how they lead, or they can look at their leader and say, you know what, this could be a different way. And so, we all have to have our own purpose, but I love that you said that. And I think you're absolutely right. We're not condemning anybody. If that's what, floats your boat and that's what gets you out of bed every morning, and you look back and you're super happy with your life just because it was about numbers, ones and zeros, X's and O's, execution and strategy, those are all important things. And that's good.
Yep.
But I think if you're a leader and you're listening to this, and again, the application doesn't stop in the workplace. We talked about this in our pre-show. You can take this same philosophy into your personal life, your personal relationships, your personal connections. But it does. I agree with you, Brian. It starts with, you have to have this kind of conversation with yourself first and decide why and what and how. And those are your personal answers. You have to do it.
Yeah. And I feel like you're speaking to me right now.
I'm just looking at you.
I'm on that journey. But Brian, you're on that journey right now too. You made you connected with something deeply as you start on your own adventure. And Blake and I went down the life.
Are we going to talk about life tracks?
We are.
Oh my
the
God,
rabbit
I love
hole.
this.
The
Please,
rabbit hole that is music for us.
If you have here, I'm going to say it this way. If you have 5 minutes, go to lifetracks.me. But caveat, understand, you're not going to be there 5 minutes. If you love music, this was my experience. This is a beautiful thing. You start to create your own personal soundtrack of your life based on the music and the songs that transport you back to a certain time in your life that usually we're talking about. It's usually an event, it's a place, it's a person, whatever it is. The going through the process was really cool because it sort of forces you to stop and think about it and go, God, what song was this tied to? I spent 2 hours. I shared earlier. I spent 2 hours. It was such a cool 2 hours. And my perspective on it, Brian was kind of joking with me. He's like, oh, I'm sorry you lost 2 hours. I said, man, I didn't lose anything. I gained so much from going back down memory lane. Mm-hmm. It was such a great experience. Such a cool concept.
Yeah. And the one that was so that I looked at it this morning, the Never Ending Story, the soundtrack. For me, my grandmother and I went to that on the opening day. I remember going movie. And I remember you said this earlier, like the sound, the smell, like the popcorn, and we were in the seats, and my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and so movies was one of the things that we did together because it's something that she could do, and I just remember that opening day of that movie very, very fondly, and just that music, like that song immediately took me there. But tell us a little bit about your purpose in starting and kind of going down this and starting on this journey, and why you created this amazing experience.
It's it's an interesting, at least it is for me, just sort of retracing the steps of how this thing even came to be. And I'll start it with back to childhood. And this won't be a long story. At least I don't think it will be. I always wanted to be a rock star as a kid, but I took absolutely no steps to putting in any of the work or practice to actually be, musical at all, other than being forced to be in the band by my parents when I was in elementary and middle school, and I played saxophone, and then got to high school and realized that the people who were in the band were ridiculed often. And so I allowed the peer pressure to make my decision to leave the band, or the high school marching band. But music's always been a huge part of my life. I mean, just huge. I remember the first cassette tapes I bought back in 85, 86, somewhere in there, when I finally had a boombox and all that. And so music's just been intertwined in my life. I'm very, very musical. Everything, I think in terms of music oftentimes. So there's always been that kind of nagging at me throughout my entire life. So park that for a second. In 2018, I was really, really fortunate to join a leadership program out of Dallas, Texas, called the Stacie Leadership Academy. And I went through a year-long program called the Integral Leadership Program, the ILP. And one of the common threads that we worked on throughout that entire year with a coach and with a cohort was our own personal purpose and core values, really doing some of the deep work. And at the end of that year, what I realized and what I was able to articulate was my personal purpose, and that is to bring people closer together. I just have this desire that when I can have an impact to bring people together, whether it's connecting people or being the person in the room that can just facilitate a good conversation and a sense of connection, I like to do that because it makes me feel good. It's interesting. I'll have a pile of work to do, and I will almost always, when I have an opportunity to connect to people that are kind of waiting on an intro that I said I would make, those are the things I do first because it gives me the greatest sense of fulfillment. I'm like, cool, I just connected so-and-so. So coming to terms with that and this notion of, okay, now there's this music thing that's always been a part of my life, and then there's this thing, this desire to bring people closer together. That was the makings of something that, was starting to form. And then leveraging, 20 years of being in, I don't know, what would you call it? The human capital space, although I'm not the people space, kind of combining those things. It's like, is there an opportunity here to put all of this together and actually build something that both feels a manifestation of where I feel like I'm being called and actually provides value so that we can make a business out of it. And so ran into a co-founder through the most unlikeliest of connections, who happens to be a technology guy. And we started beating up this idea. And, long story short, out pops this idea of Life Tracks, which happened pre-COVID. And then COVID happened. And we thought we were dead because we wanted to deliver this as a live experience, to bring people together in a live setting. And then, of course, have the tech platform to be this living, breathing thing that can live after the live experience. But we were like, oh, this is for sure a live experience because if you can connect people live, that's the most powerful way to do it. So COVID happens, and then we're like, oh, man, this thing's dead before we can even get started. But the reality is, now hindsight, I don't know that we ever do go back to 5 days a week, 8 to 5 in the office again. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But regardless, I do think that working from remote locations is here to stay at a much greater rate than it was pre-COVID. And if that is indeed true, and as organizations think about, particularly leaders, how do they make sure that they are deliberately and intentionally nurturing and strengthening relationships, which those become the basis of the culture? They're going to need a new way to do that, in a way that can break up the monotony of always being on a video platform to do it. And so we were able to modify this to a virtual workshop experience that then, of course, has the technology component afterwards. And it's all about accelerating authentic connectivity amongst the members of a team, because the more trust, to Stacie's point, the more safety, and it's really vulnerability-based trust. As Lencioni would say, there's your predictive-based trust and there's your vulnerability-based trust. Predictive-based trust, like, okay, if the three of us have worked together for 7 years and I'm about to say something, I can pretty much make an assumption based upon our trust of working together for 7 years of experience. I can predict what you're going to say or how you're going to react. That's predictive-based trust. But there's that whole other level, whether it's Brene Brown and her launching vulnerability into the mainstream, or Lencioni, who's been talking about it for a long, long time. The whole notion of vulnerability-based trust is I'm going to kind of put it out there and I'm going to say things that I don't know how you're going to respond. So I'm really going to give of myself and take a really courageous act. And, when you do that, the neuroscience says that our mirror neurons kick in. And if you see me get vulnerable, you'll likely respond in kind, but it's still a risk. So how do we do more of that so that the people who are working together on projects, on teams to deliver value in business just do better? And I think I'm trying to simplify this. It makes sense to me. Like, well, if I like my teammates more, if I trust them more, I think we'll do a better job. And if one of the pathways to do that is to just build better relationships through a storytelling platform that incorporates music, okay, maybe we're onto something. I'm trying to not make it too hard.
It's complex and simple at the same time. And I tell people something that's really interesting about building greater trust and sharing vulnerability is it actually releases oxytocin in the brain and then creates a greater, really neurochemical connection with another person. I mean, there's a lot of science and data behind this. And I think for the people that need more than just the warm and fuzzy, there's a lot of evidence that doing this work and finding ways to create greater connection and cultivate greater connection and be vulnerable and be received as vulnerable really does amplify the experience of other people, and it creates greater connection in a way that is chemical and psychological. And I think if you read Speed of Trust, it increases the speed at which you can get results, and it actually increases the results as well. And I think that's why when you shared it with me originally, I thought, and just consuming a ton of material around trust-based organizations. It's an interesting topic to think about. What now? Like we said this on the pre-show, now more than ever, what do people need? And people really are seeking out that kind of connection. So we are running over, as I knew we would when we had guests.
Yeah, it's all right.
But we are, I'm so grateful for you coming and sharing your story and being vulnerable with us and talking to us about your history and your past, and also where you're going in your future. Where can people find you, Brian? Where's the best way to reach out to you?
And as Blake had shared, the LifeTrack site is lifetracks.me, lifetracks.me, LifeTrack spelled like it sounds, and my email, super easy, brian@lifetracks.me. So Brian with an I. So really easy.
Awesome.
That's really cool. There was one last thing that you said in while you were giving us the story of that I want to challenge our listeners. We always like to give you guys something to take action on. And there was something Brian said there that I think is so key for people, that if you find yourself in a situation where you're sitting there looking at a pile of work, try your best to understand yourself at a deeper level on what really fuels your fire, and do that activity and do more of that stuff. Seek out those opportunities every single day. And if you don't know what that is, if you're listening to this and you're saying, I don't know what really fans the flame, figure that out. Start there. Find out what is that thing that you just say, God, I lose track of time. I get on those activities and I feel like somebody just injected me with coffee straight in the vein. 5 hours fly by. It feels like 5 minutes. Find that thing and seek out more and more opportunities to do that every single day. And that is so key, because the rest of the work, the pile, it's going to get done. Right? Hopefully it'll get done.
Or not.
Or you know what?
Not.
Or you realize it wasn't a priority, because guess what? It sits there at the bottom of the list and it doesn't get done today. It doesn't get done tomorrow. And if it really needed to be at the top of the list, you'll make it a priority. But the rest of the stuff just seems to work itself out. It's amazing how that happens. But that's what I want to leave you guys with today. Seek out those opportunities, find that thing, seek out care. We said it, the episode, the theme, really see how you can inject authentic, genuine care into your organization, into your teams. And if you want to carry this into your personal relationships, please do so. We're all going to benefit.
Absolutely. And greater connection, which is our whole purpose in being here too. So with that, we'll thank you for joining us on this episode. I'm Stacie and
I'm Blake. And thank you again. Please join us next time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to our show. You can find Blake and I on social media channels at Blake Rayhans and at Stacie Mallon.
Be sure to follow Optimized AF on Instagram and rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. See you next time.